Hello, everyone. This is Pam Moore, Director of the New Mexico Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program. I'm also part of the New Mexico Wellbeing Committee, and I'm here to introduce Legal Wellbeing in Action, a podcast series offered by the New Mexico Wellbeing Committee. Last year was the first full year of the Wellbeing Committee at work. In identifying ways to bring well-being education and initiatives to the New Mexico legal community, we created a 2021 campaign called What a Healthy Lawyer Looks Like. 2021 is dedicated to educating the New Mexico legal community on a variety of well-being topics that pertain to work and home life. Our goal is that every judge, lawyer, law student, and legal staff person can find some aspect of their mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual health to improve upon. We strive to educate, encourage, and support the New Mexico legal community to show up as their best self in all aspects of life, which means we will be covering a wide variety of topics that relate to the whole human self. Thank you for being here today listening to Legal Wellbeing in Action.
Hello everyone, Tanessa Akins here. I am the Clinical Coordinator for the New Mexico Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program and also the podcast series coordinator. This month's episode will be featuring the topic of hobbies, necessity or just nice to have. As part of the 2021 campaign, What a Healthy Lawyer Looks Like, we are featuring monthly wellness topics and articles published to the State Bar of New Mexico's Bar Bulletin, and airing each of these monthly topics in each podcast episode. To learn more about this campaign or to view the articles, please visit New Mexico Wellbeing Committee's webpage at www.sbnm.org. For any further questions or to learn about how you can get involved, please email me, Tanessa Akins, at teakins@sbnm.org. I will now turn it over to our two speakers, Ms. Caitlin Dillon and Ms. Denise Torres. Ladies, I am very excited to have you here today, and Denise, it is a true pleasure to see you again. Thank you both for being here today to explore the topic of hobbies with our community, and thank you to our listeners for tuning into Legal Wellbeing in Action.
Thank you, Tanessa, for that introduction, and thank you for having us on Legal Wellbeing in Action. Today's episode is about hobbies, both before and after COVID-19. My name is Caitlin Dillon, and I'm a prosecutor in New Mexico. And I'm here today with Denise Torres. Hi, Denise, how are you?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Denise, would you please introduce yourself to everybody here listening today?
Yes, Denise Torres. I have been a plaintiff's lawyer for 28 years. I would describe myself now as a recovering trial lawyer because I've transitioned into full-time mediator status.
That sounds great. I feel the recovering trial lawyer. So today we're going to talk about hobbies and the importance of hobbies in both your professional career and just being a human being on this earth. So Denise, I kind of wanted to talk to you first about, before the pandemic, did you have any hobbies that you really enjoyed doing that contributed to your overall health and well-being as a lawyer?
I did. I've always been pretty active, riding motorcycles, riding horses, being out at my mom's ranch. Always found working out to be very important to my mental well-being. And then the pandemic happened and things changed a little bit, a lot of it.
A lot of it, yeah. So tell me a little bit about before, and it sounds like you were outside a lot. And maybe in some areas with no cell phone service. How did that help you?
Well, it's just important because we're all so busy, and I know how just trying to schedule this, our calendars were so busy that it was difficult to do it. I have always been this busy, and before the pandemic, I would just consciously make time to be outdoors, to be out at my mom's ranch, to do those things that just made me calm down and reflect. And I know a lot of people, probably far more active than I was when the pandemic happened. There was just this huge shift and people didn't know what to do about it. And I think, was it last February or March, we all thought that we were going to be down for a few weeks, and in quarantine, and a few weeks turned into more than a year of restrictions and counting the days. And a lot of people just didn't fare well. And so I don't know about you, but I tried to hold on to as many of the hobbies I had before, and obviously I just couldn't do it. So I had to make a transition and come up with new things to do, like I'm sure everyone did. I also found that just some of our colleagues fared better than others. Those who were unable to work, I can't imagine the stress that they were under. And all the free time they had was not a fun free time. It was worrying about what was going to happen next. And then there were attorneys who could still work, but they had to be home with kids and homeschooling and possibly another spouse. And because I was, before the pandemic, with my hobbies, I also mediated 5 to 6 cases a week. After the pandemic, since I didn't have anything else to do, I increased my mediations to 10 a week, plus every other weekend. And so I became very, very isolated, like many, and I had to consciously make an effort to be well. And when I was doing 10 mediations a week, you can imagine how many lawyers that I came in contact with. And what I noticed is that some were just not doing well. Some actually, I think I was witnessing them spiraling just on a downward spiral. So that really caused me to stop and say, okay, I really need to make my well-being a priority. And that's what I did.
And so I want to talk a little bit about that consciousness, because it sounds like you were incredibly busy during the pandemic and then you ramped up that work schedule. What is that conscious decision to put those hobbies into a schedule look like? Because you have all of these things that you're doing. How do you fit them in? What does that process look like?
So I get up at 5:30 in the morning. And so the thing I thought, what is one portion of my incredibly busy life that I used to have that I could break down, make it indoors, and have it be helpful for me on a daily basis? And that was working out. I work out every day. So I set myself a goal, and at the beginning, it was, I thought, a high goal, and that goal was to get in 10 miles a day. And some people are probably thinking, oh my gosh, you're doing that indoors and you are mediating all day, sometimes into the evening. How did you do it? Well, I turned this hobby of working out into kind of a purpose. I mean, there was something that I said, I need to do this every day. So, for example, I would try to do like a 20-minute YouTube workout before I started my day, and something intense so that it would get me going. And then I would start my day, and in between, when lawyers were privately caucusing, I would do push-ups, squats. I would literally walk around where I'm sitting right now into my kitchen and pay attention, and then sit back down when people needed me. And there were some days during mediations, I would get 4 or 5 miles in during the day while I was just waiting for people. So I made all of those things just purposeful when I was waiting for them. Also, because sometimes I have to read 2, 3, 4 hours to prepare for some large mediations, I would walk or run while doing that. And I'd look down and couldn't believe that I already passed 10 miles because I was intensely caught up in what I was doing. And I read some articles, and professionals call that being in a state of flow, where you're doing something that in the end, when you accomplish it, kind of gives you a natural high, like the endorphins. And so I found that during the depressing pandemic, that really did help me. And then I think all of us during the pandemic, we just kind of felt out of control, and the days just meshed together. When I reached my goal every day of 10 miles, it provided a structure and a sense of personal control. Like there was one thing in my day that I absolutely had control over. And it just made me feel more confident, that I could make it through the pandemic. And at the end of the week, I mean, if you can imagine doing 10 miles a day, at the end of the week, I'd say, I did 70 miles. And it just made me feel I'm going to be all right. So,
Yeah.
Not everyone, now I know I don't have children, I don't have pets, I don't have a spouse. So other people who were struggling during the pandemic, what I did would probably be impossible for them. And so with a house full of kids or spouse or dogs and cats, and I did witness that when I would be mediating, especially for young moms that were trial lawyers. They had all of this happening at one time, and I was watching it unfold. And so I wanted to, it wasn't the time or place, but I wanted to say to them, find time, make time, no matter how small it is through your day, to get yourself grounded so you feel like you do have a purpose and that you are accomplishing things. Because when you're depressed and angry and scared, it's not good for you and it's not good for your household. And I was witnessing it. And as the pandemic continued, I would see same people just become more depressed or angry, or just that feeling of out of control. And you can witness it on Zoom. And I was witnessing it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think what was sort of interesting about the pandemic is that Zoom allowed us this sort of window into people's lives that we had never seen before, right? Normally we're we're walking into a conference room or a courtroom and everybody's all dressed up and it's this place of decorum, but Zoom, gave us a window into people's personal lives. And I think people were certainly a little bit more vulnerable in that sense. But it sounds like you very consciously made this schedule, and the schedule was the thing that really got you through. And I empathize with that because I too, working out was my anchor in my schedule for the day. And I kept the same schedule that I had. I go to a CrossFit gym with regular attendance almost every night at 6. And I worked out, every night at about 5:30 or 6. And then I have a indoor bike. And so when I did a lot of CLEs. And so when I had a CLE, I put my computer on a desk and I got on that bike and I just started writing. And to some extent, movement is very healing for both our bodies and our minds. And it does give us that flow state, which makes us just feel a little bit better. And I think your advice to people who may think, oh, I don't have a lot of time, it doesn't have to be an hour or 2 hours. It just probably needs to be about 15 minutes to do what you find meaning in, to give you a better level of stress coping. And I think that's probably the thing to do.
Those that don't have the time, or they just have little ones and dogs, it would be just impractical for them to work out in the middle of their house. When I go to my home in Las Cruces, I live on a golf course with tons of animals in the backyard because the golf course is there and they all feel safe. So when I was there, I became a major animal bird watcher, and I had blue jays and red finches, yellow finches. One day I had these birds out there that looked like parrots, and I researched it and found out that they were lovebirds that came over from Arizona when the Arizona had the fires. So they got out of the fire and came over. And then I have red hawks and Cooper hawks. The last time I was there, I filmed it all. I actually posted on Facebook because I was so enamored. I had a box turtle that I fed every day, and a bunch of rabbits, quail. I mean, you name it, I had it in my backyard. And it was so soothing and peaceful. And at the end of the day, made me so happy just to see those creatures frolicking in my backyard. So
yeah, and they were just doing their thing.
Just doing their thing. My condo in Albuquerque, where I'm at now, I obviously don't have all those things, but I do have finches. And in the morning, like if I had my door open right now, they would be making so much noise that it would disturb what we're doing. So I really search for those little things, find some joy once a day, no matter how small it is.
And that's great advice. And I think, so it sounds like the birds were sort of a new kind of hobby during the pandemic. Were there any new hobbies that you picked up? Because, for example, there were restrictions on going outside and doing different things. And some of us who had hobbies that were, maybe a little bit more interactive, we had to reshape and rethink those hobbies. Did that happen to you?
I became a professional declutterer. I don't particularly care for clutter. And so I would pick a day and say, okay, you're going to go clean out that junk drawer, or there's that drawer in the bottom of the closet that just needs to be organized. And again, once I finished it, I felt a sense of accomplishment and control, and it kept my mind right. So what my other friends, I had friends that learned how to lay tile, who learned a new language. Oh boy, I also had to spend some time cooking, because takeout food, and where I live here, it's just hard for people. You can't really get to me. I have to buzz them in. So I learned how to cook all kinds of things that I would have never attempted before. Part of it was that if I messed it up, it was just me. So I wouldn't be embarrassed. I just tried again. So, I pretty much tried everything to keep my days interesting and full. I can't imagine anybody not binge watching either Netflix or Amazon or Hulu. And so I, of course, did a bit of that usually at night when I was done with everything, to try to just clear my mind. So the pandemic for me was not terrible. And I know other people are going, my God, what's wrong with you? But one of the things that I did, and I did this before the pandemic, but I did it a whole lot more daring, is, we had so much bleakness, and that feeling where you just felt like Groundhog Day, and every day you just lost track of time. I just was grateful, and I practiced gratefulness daily. Mm-hmm. I'm safely in my own home. I still get to work every day. I'm still working out. I would focus on how great my coffee tasted every morning, and that little piece of silence before I started the craziness. I would say things like, gosh, I've got great friends. My family loves me. I would just find something to be terribly grateful for, and it just kept my mood up. So I highly recommend that. And I saw when I was at the ranch this week, and I told you guys I wasn't going to have service for a couple days, I noticed something that my mom probably didn't know she was doing, that is practice gratefulness. I noticed on her, she still has a handwritten calendar. I sure don't, but she has a handwritten calendar. She would write things that were positive that happened to her on a certain day. Like, 10 deer came to the pond this morning while I was having coffee. And another day, Denise sent me the most beautiful flowers. And through the whole month, I went back through her calendar, and she's been doing that for I don't know how long. I didn't know it, but she is practicing gratefulness, and maybe she doesn't even know she's doing it, but it made me happy, even reading those lovely things that she wanted to remember.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. I started doing that fairly recently because I have a calendar on my phone for personal life, and then I have a calendar on my phone for work, and I was having trouble integrating them. And my mom does the same thing. She's a school administrator, and she has used a paper calendar ever since I can remember. And that's how she keeps track of things. And I started doing that, and I realized, first of all, I merged both my calendars into one. And I was able to do lists and cross things off, but I was also able to, write about something like, I also love to bake and cooking. And I tried some recipes that really worked out well. And then I tried some that were just complete and total disasters. Thanks, Paul Hollywood, for that terrible Bouche de Noël recipe. Sorry.
What I think a lot of us who have been consciously trying to practice wellness during the pandemic is we really put ourselves out there, And I did things I've never done, like cooking those meals that were a little complicated. And in the end, whether they failed or not, I still felt good that I'd tried something new and survived. And I recommend that for everyone. Put yourself out there a little bit. You'll be better for the experience.
Yeah, that's totally true. And I think one of the things that's important about hobbies is it has to be something that's real and meaningful for you. But how do you discover that if you're just doing the same things over and over? And how do you build that into your life? And I look at like reading things online about people doing sourdough starters for the first time, or knitting, or I have a good colleague who learned how to play the ukulele. And there were a ton of things that people were doing that they had never picked up before the pandemic. So what the pandemic, like this beautiful opportunity for growth for people to really slow down and explore the world around them. Like you have, you had all those birds and things. I did a great amount of yard work that I had never had the time to do before, while I listened to things that I needed to listen to for work. And now, my backyard is a really cool space. It still needs some work, but I was able to really spend a couple of days doing that. And I think that's really important for people to see, is that even though we didn't have our same busy lives, if we really looked at it, we had more time and more opportunities to kind of do things that we had never done before, or things that we didn't perceive we had time for before, I think.
I completely agree with that. And other things that came about, and they weren't on purpose, it was a beautiful accident. Some people changed their work environment that made them better, made them more productive, made them just happier as individuals. And I'm hoping that some of my girlfriends that are trial lawyers that weren't partners at the time, some of them have become partners during the pandemic because their productivity was through the roof. When people started going back to work, I said to them, don't go back to things just because. That shouldn't be our knee-jerk reaction. Really, once again, be conscious about what are you going to keep in your life that made your life better, whether it be your work life or your personal life or those hobbies, and those things that you didn't want before the pandemic and you didn't want during the pandemic, you found a way to get them out of your life. Keep them out of your life. And those that have done that are just happier people all the way around.
I think the pandemic was a great way. So, I think we all decluttered our houses, did household projects, but I think we also decluttered our lives a little bit to some extent, in the way that we were working.
And, I think I thought I was a very social person, but as I said, the pandemic was not difficult for me. Those people that I'm very, very close to, they're the type of relationships that I didn't need to see them or talk to them every day. It's more of a state of mind. And so those relationships actually flourished during the pandemic, even though we didn't get to see each other. We just realized how important that person just being in your life was. Then the people that maybe were acquaintances, I probably won't spend that same time. When I have time, I will spend with those people that are deeply lifelong, important individuals that I plan to have in my life forever. And again, that's the quality of my life improved just in that one area. And I hope for others, they found some deeper meaning. I know I did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I had that in my life. I always like to say, if, in Zoom meetings during the pandemic, we had a section about how everybody talked how they felt. And, some people had, their experience was not great, but I always said, my life got a little bit smaller, but it was still very much the same. It just had a different setting. Although I did have, working from home was different for me just because of some of the content I deal with at my job. And so I really had to focus on how do I separate the content of my work from my house, because before, my house is this place of, peace for me. There's no violence in it. Like every time I clean, I burn sage, and I'm like, if this doesn't belong here, it better get out. So it was sort of interesting having that transition for me, because my work was coming into my place of peace. And I would say it took me about 2 or 3 months to reconcile that. I don't know if you had the same experience when you were doing mediations, because I don't know how you did those, but I'm sure there were certain spaces that you associated with mediation, and then that changed. What was your experience with that?
I have always been an individual who can work anywhere. Like, for example, I have friends that have to get dressed up like a lawyer and go to work and have an office setting. I've always been somebody who can be productive in my pajamas and a crooked ponytail. And so again, the transition for me just wasn't that big of a deal. What was a big deal is everything I did was in person. And doing 5 or 6 mediations a week, I would see how many sets of lawyers. There would be some cases that one mediation would take up every room at the state bar. So what I am, and I don't know if I'm going to have trouble doing it, but being in person again, am I going to have to relearn? Do I shake your hand? Do I fist bump? Do I elbow bump? Some people are not going to want to go back to, because I was always a hugger. And now the pandemic for huggers was a tough time. So I'm going to have to relearn some social graces. And I haven't done an in-person mediation yet. So we'll see how that goes. When I talk to you again, I'll fill you in.
Yeah, that would be curious to know, because I did a bench trial during the pandemic, and I did a couple of one in-person preliminary hearing, and it certainly, the courtroom was very, very different. Being a trial lawyer, I'm used to spending, and especially when I was at the district attorney's office, 2 to 3 hours in the courtroom in the morning, and you're talking to people and you're trying to work things out. And some people do better in person, and some people are pretty good with emails, and all of that was just suddenly gone. And now when we go back in, we have masks. And I know for me, I'm a huge, I convey a lot of my emotions or expressions through my face, and that was just covered.
Oh, and no, that was when I was Zooming and people chose to be in one room together during the middle of the pandemic, they would social distance, but it was terrible because I rely so much on people's expressions and body language. And I tend to mediate just catastrophic cases, either death or quadriplegia or paraplegia, things that were devastating to families. And I would know how far to take things in a certain room, depending on the emotions of certain people in that room. And I lost the ability to see that when people were on masks. So the transition was difficult, but I don't know, I'm curious to know how you felt about it. Zooming was incredibly productive. Zoom mediations for me have been, my percentage of cases I settled did not change from being in person to Zoom. And obviously, if I had to be in person, I couldn't do 10 mediations or more a week just because I'd have to drive somewhere. Here, I change locations with the click of a button. But I didn't mind Zoom. I know some people absolutely hated it. What was your experience?
The Solutions Group, the State Bar of New Mexico's EAP provider, offers confidential and free professional counselors to support employees and their direct family members by offering short-term counseling, assessment, and referrals for any life struggle. This includes drug addiction, relationship conflict, anxiety, depression, and grief and loss. Other services include dependent care, crisis assessment, intervention, and educational presentations, free well-being webinars, and an online stress assessment tool. Call 505-254-3555 or 1-866-254-3555 and then identify with NMJ Lab to schedule an appointment or video visit.
It was kind of the same. I feel like there are certain things that have decreased the waiting time in a courtroom that was sort of like dead time. And so if there was some of that dead time, I could pursue, some of the hobbies that we talked about. I could read, or I could journal, or I could cook and build that in. And so I certainly appreciated not having to sit in a courtroom for so long, just sort of like being on my phone or trying to get other work done. I feel like for attorneys, that freeing up of time was pretty good for us. At the same time, I too rely on a lot of expressions, and I do crimes against children and child exploitation cases. And so doing some of those things over Zoom and doing some preliminary hearings, I lost that ability to, when a witness is going to say something, I found myself interrupting them more because I had trouble reading their body when they were going to say something next. In the courtroom, I think there are natural silences, and you can really get a really nice conversation going with your witness. And I struggled to develop that during the pandemic. And so I read some stuff on it, and I really tried to work on it. And so it'll be interesting to see. I feel like as lawyers, we've all gotten a very new skill set that has the potential to make us a lot more productive. And at the same time, there's some communication things that, we all could probably work on. I know, especially for me, I struggled to communicate sometimes as a natural introvert. And so that was kind of one of those things that I was really working on, is how do I convey this emotion, and how do I convey what happened over a screen? Is it going to have the same effect, essentially?
Are there things that you're hoping that the judges keep in place once the world opens up again, that you found to be efficient, or something that was a positive that we should keep as practitioners?
I think there were certainly some hearings that if lawyers just had a quick conversation on the phone or a quick email exchange back and forth, we could file a pleading and we could agree to more things rather than going to court. And then that would allow us to have a little bit more time to do some different things and to slow down a little bit. I think the life of a trial lawyer is go, 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 and you have all this stuff. And I think for the longevity of our careers, this pandemic was sort of this incredible thing that I think extended a lot of careers, right? Because it really forced people to slow down, right? I'm going to slow down, the court system isn't moving as fast. And so, you could really take a look at your life and say, like, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? Or are there things that I could do to make this better? Because I find meaning in this work, and this work is hard. How do I continue to do this successfully and still be a healthy person at the same time? That's just kind of those things.
Some of my friends that do civil litigation, and mostly probably what I mediate is civil litigation, they worked more than they've ever worked in their life because they were kind of a captive audience for their clients, where they just stayed home and billed more hours than they'd ever billed in their life. And so for those individuals, that conscious, you have to spend time on your well-being consciously. You have to set aside that time. You have to take control over it, or your work life is actually not going to get better. You're just going to put in more hours and the days will run together. So with your friends, did you have friends in different areas that just fared better than other areas?
Yeah, I think where I work, there's a conscious focus on, if you need to take time, you take time. If, what do you need to succeed as an attorney in our office? And there's a conscious objective to keep that kind of at the forefront, because if you have a prosecutor who feels good, who is balanced, they're going to put forth some really good results. And the other thing is ethically and professionally, they're going to do the next right thing, right?
That is
Because I
something
think happy
we didn't
lawyers.
That's
Yeah.
great. That matters. Obviously, hugely important.
Yeah, we have a really high burden and we have a huge responsibility with the things that we do. And I know, in my office, I have a really good colleague and we both love to CrossFit. That's something that we've done together. But we also, we're also really conscious about, cooking and prepping our meals so that we feel good. And we do this during trial. We're always checking in on each other. Hey, are you okay? Hey, do you need a snack? Do you need some coffee? And so that's something that I've always tried to work on. But I also have seen colleagues who, they always want to do the most. They want to be the best. They want to do the most, file the most cases, win the most cases, do all this stuff. But the question is, at what cost? And so I know I've asked some of those people like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? Why don't you go home, take care of yourself, right? And I think for some people, it takes, something scary or some health scare or something like that for them to say like, at what cost am I performing this way, right? Because at some point, there's a point where you hit and you're not going to do any better the harder that you work because you haven't slept, you haven't ate, you haven't tried to take care of yourself. And as that continues to go, there's just a negative impact. And so I like your language of I'm going to make a conscious decision today to do the things that are going to make me the best professional going forward. So what does that look like for you? And that's different for everybody.
So for those people who are struggling that might be listening to this and they're going, I'm just still not there. I'm still floundering. I don't feel good. What would you recommend that people who are doing better, how do we help them is the thing? How can we as friends or colleagues help them get to a better place?
That's such a great question. And I think if you're out there and you're struggling and you're hearing this, don't be afraid to reach out to people, start to ask questions. I think probably the number one thing to building some space and time in your life to really think about you is take your cell phone and turn it off. And even if it's just for 15 minutes, like the building's not going to burn down, nothing bad's going to happen. It will be there waiting for you when you're done with that 15 minutes. And maybe that 15 minutes is going outside on a walk. Maybe it's just sitting in silence. Maybe it's you really like this, this music. So you're going to put it on for 15 minutes and dance, right? In your kitchen, whatever that looks like. That's one of my favorite things to do. So, whatever that looks like.
You and I talked about that. When I've had kind of a stressful day, meaning the cases that I mediated just ripped my guts out and I was fighting not to cry all day, I'll put music on and I'll find upbeat music and I'll be in my socks on my wood floor dancing up a storm. And I realize after 30 minutes or so that stress has fallen away and I'm happy again. So
right.
Again, do it.
Yeah, no, that's the greatest advice. Whatever music you like. I personally like Carly Rae Jepsen. I learned that being a camp counselor. That was actually one of my favorite things about being a camp counselor was that, if you take the time to have fun and to play and to be just a little bit silly, you will find that your mood will just skyrocket, right? Because you feel better inside and you're not really letting any sort of external forces affect how you feel.
And those that are a little timid, that, for example, they found that they were more productive at home, ask your employer or ask your partner and show them that you were better not only to yourself, but better for the partnership, better for the company, because you were just in a better space and more productive. If you don't ask, you'll never get it. So the worst they can say is no, and maybe it's not an all or nothing. Maybe there's a hybrid in there that makes your employer, it's acceptable to them and it makes your life better. So you have to try. Anybody that knows me, I will say, if you're not happy with what you're doing, what we go to work and do every day, we spend most of our time doing it. If you're not happy, you absolutely have to change it, because the alternative is having a life that you're not happy with. You're either going to be sad or mad or both, and that's just not a way to live.
That's right. And I think, another way to look at that too is that's a part of personal growth, right? Is understanding the best ways that work for you. And that may change over time. You don't know. But I think the pandemic was certainly an opportunity for people to realize, like, hey, maybe an office isn't for me, or maybe I do need an office. Maybe I need to, put a suit on every day and go somewhere, because that schedule is what keeps me on task. And I think that's another thing for people, is just learning that.
For the small practitioners, or there's a great number of us who work in large settings that would be better suited to go to a smaller setting. There's people that want to be solo practitioners, but they don't think they can afford to rent a building. The pandemic showed us that you can work from home, and now there's co-ops. Lisa Curtis I don't think it's even open yet, but has one in her building for lawyers just like that. The state bar, again, another resource that you can work from home and not pay this monstrosity of rent. And if you need an office, there's places for you to spend a small amount of money on to have those spaces. So there's just so many different options for people who are not happy with where they are right now. Change it now.
That's right. Yeah. And I think the other thing too is if you've kind of realigned your life and you've taken a look at it, and, maybe you don't have to work, the 10 or 12 hours a day. Maybe you put in the 8 and you're super productive at the 8, and then you can go outside and do whatever you find meaning in, whether it's biking or running or knitting or, whatever it is. I think we've learned during this time that work doesn't necessarily have to come first. And what a huge shift for the legal profession, right? I, as a prosecutor and government lawyer, never thought I would have the opportunity to work from home. I never thought that. And, now I've had it for, a year and some change. And I think for me, it's made me a better litigator. My motion practice is so much better. I'm a better writer. And that's because I spent time working on that. And I wasn't, in an office, and I didn't have people constantly coming in. I was at home, and I had that quiet time. And then I've also been able to develop new hobbies and to work on ones that I have. And I feel like a much more balanced lawyer. Like, I've come out of this a much more balanced lawyer. And I know that's not the case for everybody, but I hope that, if you're hearing this and you're struggling, you can sort of say, like, start asking yourself the questions, what do I need to do to change some things? And change is scary and it can be hard, but just keep taking the next right step forward. If you keep moving forward, things will start to happen.
Yeah, I have several friends that their lives changed over the pandemic. One, and she was always took care of herself, but she bought a Peloton bike. I think I had like 4 or 5, but one in particular, she lost 20 pounds and is in the best shape she has ever been in her life. And she feels that has transcended into her work life. She's just better at everything. She feels better. She's happier. She said she has a second chance at life. And if we take this moment in time, that I'm hoping we're coming out of it. Watching the news this morning, I don't know, people are very having anxiety that the world is opening up. And that's just going to be a whole other learning experience for us. Those of us who've been vaccinated, do we wear masks? Do we not? Do we do it out of respect? Do we do it because we're protecting other people? I mean, we're still not done yet. So we just have to keep trying. But I feel so strongly that being cognizant of your mental well-being, being cognizant of your mood in today's pandemic environment has to be a priority. It helps you remain calm and constructive when everything around you is uncertain. And if you can find something that keeps you in that good space, then you're going to get through this and you're going to be better for it in the end.
That's right. And I think, one day at a time, doing this one day at a time, and reopening will look like reopening. Who knows? We've never been through a reopening after a pandemic. So, there's no guidebook.
Right.
So we'll just keep, I think, keep doing the things that keep you healthy, that, keep you intact and keep you happy, because, happy lawyers make better decisions, and we have better outcomes for the people that we work with. And at the end of the day, I think we really just want to help people, and we can't help people if we don't take care of ourselves.
Right. And then just doing those things that make you uncomfortable every now and then, like when you guys ask me to do this, I get so nervous and I think, God, what can I say to anybody? I don't know how to help people, but when I do it, like I did the first one that you asked me to do, I was better for the nervousness and the challenge when I got through the other side of it and I didn't pass out or, nothing bad happened to me. So you just have to keep trying. And some things are going to make you feel uncomfortable, but that might be the thing that changes your life.
That's right. That's right. And challenge yourself every day. And just remember Glennon Doyle's really good advice. We can do hard things and we can do them together. So thank you so much.
You're just getting to know you through this has been an absolute joy. I am glad that you are one of the prosecutors that we have in New Mexico. Makes me feel good that you're there. So keep doing your good work.
And thank you, Denise, for mediating and helping everybody get to a place where they, find some sense of closure. And thanks for being with me today. So I think thanks for listening to Legal Wellbeing in Action. We hope to see you again and talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening. This episode was produced by the State Bar of New Mexico's Wellbeing Committee and the New Mexico Judges and Lawyers Assistance Program. All editing and sound mixing was done by Blue Sky eLearn. Intro music is by Gil Flores. The views of the presenters are that of their own and are not endorsed by the State Bar of New Mexico. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, or legal advice. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition.